Today we're going to talk about Viltrox's focal reducer, which is a new low-cost alternative speed booster adapter for Canon RF mount cameras. They're marketing it for the Canon C70 and also for the RED Komodo. So in today, I'm not necessarily going to do a full-on review, and you'll see why later in the video, but I am going to do a first impressions of this Viltrox focal reducer speed booster, which they're now calling it. I'll show some footage, I'll talk about it, talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and more after this. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Geoff Fagien, and today we are talking about the Viltrox focal reducer 0.71, also speed booster, for the Canon RF mounted cameras. So today we're using it with the RED Komodo. I actually have it on my RED Komodo behind me over there, and I tested it with a few different lenses. I tested it with Canon 70-200 f4, the Sigma 18-35 art, the Sigma 30mm art, and also the Zeiss Otus 55mm 1.4. Testing these lenses led to some interesting results, and I'm actually really excited to have this focal reducer, as it's half the price of Canon's focal reducer, and it lets people get into using focal reducers on their RF mount cameras for a very affordable price. It's around $280. I'll put the link to it in the description below, and I'll put the full price above here. Canon's had their focal reducer 0.71 for about a year now. Metabones has had theirs for a few years, but it was originally designed for the Canon EOS R with the crop of 4K that it did, but that focal reducer did work on the RED Komodo and the Canon C70. So since Viltrox always seems to have really good alternatives price-wise for other focal reducers on the market, I hit up Viltrox. They actually sent me this to test, but they did not pay me to do this review. I was just really interested in checking it out, so thank you for them for sending it out. Let's talk about the Canon 70-200, which was the first lens I tested. I did a test with the normal Canon RF to EF adapter, and then I also used the Viltrox focal reducer. Now, if you see on the Viltrox focal reducer, there actually is vignetting on the corners of the Canon 70-200 f4, and it is a full frame lens, which kind of shows that when you do the math that you are getting a slightly wider field of view than full frame on the Komodo when you're using an RF focal reducer at 0.71. Now, I didn't get vignetting on all of my full frame glass, so this does seem to be limited to the Canon 70-200. I was even getting vignetting when I was using extenders, the 1.4 and the 2x extenders, so again, specific to the Canon 70-200. Not all lenses work exactly the same on this camera. The next lens I tested was Sigma's 18-35 art. The first thing I noticed, which will probably happen with any fast glass, is when you shoot wide open, there is a little bit of a hazing effect on the footage, which was somewhat typical when we used Viltrox's adapter on Micro Four Thirds cameras, such as the Pocket 4K, which we're using right now. So it's unfortunate that you get that, because you don't get it as much on Canon's focal reducer, but again, this thing is less than half the price. It seems to go away once you go past the speed boosted aperture of f2. The next thing that happened, which seems to be lens specific, is once I tried to go through the aperture range of the Sigma 18-35, the adapter just started changing the aperture nonstop, and I took a video of it. It didn't happen on any of my other lenses, and I did check with the normal adapter afterward just to make sure that nothing got damaged, and it seemed to work fine after that. So it seems that there is a little bit of an incompatibility issue right now with Sigma's 18-35, so do be aware. But the beauty of these Viltrox adapters is that there is a USB port built in, so they can do firmware updates, which is why I'm not doing a full review of this focal reducer, as it's not quite ready yet, but I do think that they will be ready soon enough. Things happen on the original Micro Four Thirds focal reducer a decent amount, and they seem to fix them via firmware updates, so I'm sure they will be on it. The next lens I tested was Sigma's 30mm, which again, wide open, it was a bit hazy, but that lens is also not too sharp wide open when you shoot at f1.4. What I wanted to test on Sigma's 30mm was the autofocus, because it is pretty decent on the RED Komodo if you stay within that autofocus box. And when I was testing the autofocus, it just wasn't quite as good on the Viltrox adapter as it was using the normal Canon EF to RF adapter. So it looks like, at least on the RED Komodo, the autofocus isn't quite there yet. Maybe it is better on some other lenses, but I'm sure this is something that Viltrox again can fix via firmware update, which is yet another reason this is a first impressions video. The next lens I tested was the Zeiss Otus 55mm 1.4 lens, which is a pretty clinically sharp lens. Wide open on that lens, again, we had a little bit of ghosting, hazing, but as you stop down, once you get to f2, that thing is really sharp. The footage is pretty much just as sharp as when you're not using the focal reducer, which is crazy. And you get a much wider field of view when you look at the Otus with the focal reducer and without the focal reducer. It's just way more telephoto without the focal reducer. And what's interesting is if you look at the R3D files, the Viltrox actually translates what the approximate boosted focal length would be. So the Zeiss Otus 55mm was being read as a 39mm, which I find pretty interesting. One major thing to note if you plan on using this Viltrox focal reducer with the RED Komodo is that you actually need to remove the tripod foot from the adapter, as it doesn't stick out far enough and it will catch the bottom of the RED Komodo where it sticks out. So play it safe. That tripod foot is not going to fit no matter what on the RED Komodo, so do make sure you take it off. Overall, I've had a great time testing this Viltrox focal reducer. It's not quite yet ready for prime time. I don't know if I would use this on paid gigs, but for fun work, I can't wait to do more with it. I do plan on testing the Helios 44-2 more, especially with my ovular bokeh adapter and using it in low light here in Fort Lauderdale at night. So I will have a video up on that soon. So if you want to see that, if you like what you got out of today's video, you got knowledge out of today's video, please make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell to keep up to date with the latest videos on the channel. Until next time, my name's Geoff Fagien. Thank you for watching, everybody, and I will see you in the next video.